that they've taken time out of their schedule and their community needs to join us today. We're going to start with Maria Stella Rossetti. She's the director of the San Giorgio Library in Pistoia in Tuscany, Italy. I hope I pronounced all that correctly, doing my best. Lisa Rosenblum is the executive director of the King County, Washington Library System. Lauren Mcclain is a certified instructor for the National Council of Behavioral Health and Mental Health First Aid USA. And Richard Moniz is the director of library services at the Horry Georgetown Technical College in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And he has taught and written for us at ALA extensively on the topic of mindfulness. So we're really glad to have him with us. We are going to begin with you, Maria Stella. So we will just get your audio set up. Maria Stella, are you able to hear me?
Yes. Thank you so much. Your pronunciation of Italian is excellent.
All right. For a person who doesn't speak one word, that's a nice compliment.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you all.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we're really grateful. Most of our audience is from here in the U.S., but we've got a lot of international participants with us as well. And the international spotlight has certainly been on Italy lately. So we're really glad to have someone with your background who can join us and help us today. So my hope is just that we can start by having you take us through things from the beginning, both from your community's perspective and from your library's perspective. So I guess what I'll start by asking you is, when did the coronavirus in your community go from something that was sort of abstract, something that was just on the news, something people were talking about but not experiencing, to something that was actually affecting people?
Yes, so till the end of January, the virus was only on the news, but not yet in our backyard. So on February the 6th, the first Italian citizen coming back from China was found positive. And during the next 3 weeks, the virus spread at high speed only in the northern areas of Italy, where in a handful of days we began to count a lot of people died and hundreds of infected and positive. So the central government, the Italian central government, decreed the closure of schools, universities, libraries, theaters, and so on, only in the so-called red zone in the north, while in all the other areas, like here, for instance, life was still normal and everything was going as usual. So libraries were open and we were watching an horror movie from TV set in another area of the same country. So at that time, in February, it was so difficult for us to distinguish reality and a movie because in the most part of the country, life was going as usual. The things changed in March. The first to close are schools and universities all over the country. And March the 2nd, 3 weeks ago, all the libraries out of the red zone are open, but we had to create a distance of at least 1 meter among the seats, and only the events and the courses, the reading groups are canceled. But the life is normal, quite normal. The next week, March the 9th, all the country become red zone and the libraries are closed as everything, but we are working inside the building in order to create new services while physical facilities are shut down. So the next week, March the 16th, we are all at home and we are working using our own computer till the 3rd of April. So now we cannot leave our homes except for food and for necessary jobs. Captivity is the only way we have to stop the virus and be safe and healthy. What we see in the hospitals in the north of the country is a tragic lesson for everyone, a lesson we learn every day. A lot of people die alone, far from relatives and friends, without funeral services in order to avoid the danger of contagion. And the most part of people died are seniors. We are losing our grandmothers and grandfathers, and we cannot spend with them their last hours. We cannot hug each other, shake hands with others, and now we know that it's not anymore a movie. Here in the center of Italy, in our district, with about 300,000 people, only one man has died, about 40 infected, and 100 positive put in isolation. For every one of us, it has been more difficult to understand that the virus was true, because we have lived till March the 9th, two different stories in the north and in the other areas of Italy. And after March the 9th, all the country is red zone, as I said, and the same rules are applied everywhere. Compared to the North region, here we are 2 weeks of captivity in advance, and it's hard to say, but maybe we will survive, as I hope, also thanks to the expertise and good practices gathered in these areas.
Okay, I'm just so sorry for what's going on there. I mean, it sounds gut-wrenching, and a lot of people have been saying that we in the U.S. are on the same curve as Italy, so we may not be far behind. I think we're sort of seeing a lot of that happening right now in slow motion. So can you tell me about the role that the library has been playing in the community, how that's evolved from the beginning of the crisis to right now, and what sort of services are you providing since your physical facilities are shut down? Oh, Maria Stella, I think we muted you by accident. Sorry, okay.
Okay. I'm a public librarian, and we public librarians from the beginning of the crisis have learned a very important lesson on the topic digital lending. Before the crisis, how can I say, we were divided into two different parties, yes or no. Digital lending is an alternative to the visit to the library, and the most part of us are engaged to help people to reach the library and use all the services inside. So we were used to devote not too much money for digital lending, while we believed that it was better to channel money on physical books, because digital lending was used generally, above all, by strong readers. So the first lesson in these days is that we are pressed to change our habits and devote much more money than before on our platforms of digital lending. And only in our library, we have about 50 users, new users per day, who filled the form for this service, which was looked down by many readers who love to smell the perfume on the paper, you know. Secondly, from the beginning, we have been conscious that our job was to help users and citizens to choose reliable sources of information against the tons of fake news spread on TV and above all on social networks. So we every day try to push the good sources as if it were our reference service at a distance. Uh, Another important thing we do every day is to spread news about the national project Digital Solidarity, where several TV and movies companies offer for free in this period access to programs and movies, and many entertainment companies and educational channels offer for free access to very useful platforms for students, kids, parents, and so on. Other things we are doing is creating on our own new resources and opportunities. We have called some writers, novelists we are in contact with to record short videos with a presentation of their books as if they were in our auditorium inside the library. So every day our users can attend some events, keeping in touch with the library. For kids, our kids librarians read aloud short stories every day and record the video on our YouTube channel, inviting families to reach us at the same time of the physical scheduled events canceled. We also offer same literary games and other posts on Facebook where we write that we miss our users, our volunteers, our allies, and they write their thoughts, sharing with us the hope to be all together again in our a wonderful library in our common home. So, digital lending, reference service, meetings with authors, read aloud sessions, games, and some emotional posts with a human touch.
Thanks so much, Maria Stella. Those are great insights, and yeah, we're all just yearning for that personal connection. It's funny. I'll just share a personal story. Yesterday my son was playing video games online with a friend, and usually we try to limit his video game time, but he was just so happy to be doing something with someone in real time that we said, play as long as you want. So I understand. So I guess the last question I'd ask you is, as far as the way the libraries responded, what are the things you're most proud of? And I think you listed some of those already. And what are the things, if you had to do this over, and hopefully none of us ever have to do this over, but if you did have to do it over, what are the things you would have been differently?
Oh, it's not easy to. We could have done better. Above all, as I said, increasing more the digital lending service and pushing more the habits of using the service. We could have done better maybe with our friends of the library. We have an association of more than 500 people. Our friends have suspended their precious services devoted above all to seniors living alone. For instance, the home loan of library books and for seniors and also for impaired people, and the service of reading aloud for people who cannot anymore read on their own. So we have still time to ask our volunteers to call by phone those people and spend half an hour with them, maybe reading a story or reading a chapter of a book together. I think that we all think that loneliness is an ugly thing to deal with, especially in these sad days. So we could have done better, maybe with our allies. We could allies all the people, experts in some topic, who give their time for free, their skills for free, in order to offer to the community classes, courses on everything, on the different topics. In these days, we were not able to ask them to join us through the social network and offer some suggestions, some recommendations, some advices on their own topic to share with our community from the page of the library on Facebook. But I think we have still time to do it. And just this morning in my office inbox, I have found a little project on financial literacy made by one of our allies, expert in financial stuff, with good advices on how to spend money during the virus period. We have been successful in a certain sense in offering information on the new free opportunities we can find on the web in order to spend a good time at home altogether. So in these days we are working hard, but I guess we are only at the beginning, and I think that your help, the help of this community of more than 1,100 and more people will be strongly useful. So I think that union is strength, and never as in these times we fear to be in the same boat. I think so.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria Stella. We've got a couple minutes for questions. So I know one question that was asked directly of you. So in the United States, well, I'm sure this is a global problem, but we have a big issue with the term we use is fake news, misinformation that's being spread on social media, on the web.
Yes.
And some people are wondering if you're, number one, are you dealing with that same problem in Italy? And if you are, what's the library doing to help?
So we are keeping in touch with NewsGuard in the United States in order to use the service in order to help people to distinguish the good news, the bad news, and in order to recreate at a distance in a remote area the reference service of the common library, of the physical library, but is not easy because pain and stress are so high, and it's difficult also for us to work at a distance. We are not used to do it, and we don't have the equipment useful, and it's a new story for us. We are trying. We are doing the best we can, but it's not enough. I think so.
Okay. Someone would like to know how common is internet access among the users in your community? Are most of your patrons connected, or do a lot of them rely on the physical library for internet access?
I didn't understand, please. Could you repeat?
Sure. Absolutely. They're wondering.
I apologize for my terrible English. I'm very sorry.
No. Your English is wonderful. We just the question was just how many of your patrons have home internet access, and how many rely on the library as the place they come in to get internet access.
I am not able to understand, because maybe could you write the question in the?
Sure. We can write it in the chat space. No problem. It's a confusing question, but here. If somebody wouldn't mind cutting and pasting that into the chat space, but I think I'm trying to phrase this the best way I can. The question is, how many people in your community have internet access at home?
Oh yeah.
And how many rely on the physical library?
Internet access is spread in the community. So it's easy to communicate. You know that Italians are the first buyers of smartphones all over the world. Everyone has the internet connection. So if we didn't have it, we were lost. The most part of people has internet connection, above all through the smartphone. And that's why it's very important to create new services devoted to the smartphone access. So yes, we are lucky.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. We're going to move on to our next panelist, but we really appreciate your taking the time to join us. And this has been tremendously insightful, and our hearts go out to you and your community and your country for everything that you're going through. And your insight here today is making a real difference for all of us. So thank you so much, Maria Stella.
I thank you, and God bless you, you all.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and we are going to move on to Lisa Rosenblum. Lisa is the Executive Director of the King County, Washington Library System, so that is in the Seattle area, which, as most of you probably know, sort of I don't want to say ground zero, but that's been a hot zone here in the U.S. For COVID-19. So, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. You can hear me? That's good?
Hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much. I often say I want King County Library System to be on the leading edge. I didn't want it to be on the leading edge of this, but sometimes life has this happen, and I really appreciate being asked about our experience. I just want to give you go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Yeah, I just was going to say thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here.
And I've seen on the chat, I know a bunch of people. I've worked all over the country, so thank you, those I know that are listening. I miss all of you. So having said that, I just wanted to give you some background. First of all, King County Library, as you said, is everything but Seattle. The first case actually occurred in King County in a city called Kirkland at the Life Care Center. But just to give you a summary about how fast this all happened, on January 19th, the first corona case was diagnosed in Snohomish County, which is the county directly north of us. Then on February 29th, the first death occurred at the Life Care Center. That's a nursing home in Kirkland. And it was then that we knew that what we all now know as community contact had occurred. So at that point, we pulled out what we called our business continuity plan. That's basically disaster planning for us in case of a business interruption. And it's not just pandemic, but it also includes floods, any kind of, and it has levels of response. I also got together our emergency response team. The leadership team started getting together on a every other day, and eventually a daily basis, sometimes twice a day. It's also worth saying that the King County Library System is a special district, which means that we have to create our own plans. We have our own HR functions, financial functions. We're not under a county or a city, although my board is appointed by our county executive. So we are an independent taxing district, which sometimes is good and sometimes is not so good. We couldn't rely on a higher institution to tell us what to do. So the way we responded, and the issue really here in King County is we in Seattle Public were the first libraries to have to deal with this. And the one thing that I stated from the beginning is we're going to rely on science. We're going to rely on our county health to tell us what to do. Because as you know, especially during the first days of this crisis, a lot of misinformation was out there. And so we immediately started partnering and getting on webinars with our county health experts and started to respond based on the daily daily press reports and also direction from our governor, Jay Inslee, who, by the way, has been really very supportive and really great about this, really getting on top of this crisis. So the first thing we did was we started telling our public that we were going to do extra cleaning, which we did. And getting back to Maria's comment, we also posted coronavirus fact sheets. We kept updating them in different languages. Whatever we had, we created a website right away. This was back on February 29th, informing our public about what we were doing and what was going on in our community so that they would have factual information that they could rely upon from us. Then as the days went by, the real issue with us is that we couldn't just close because, as you know, we're public libraries. The last thing we ever want to do in a crisis is close. But this, as I mentioned to our state librarian, our state library directors group, this is a different animal here. As much as we want to be open, this is a community health crisis. And so the normal way we cope with being open no matter what just didn't work for us. We started after hearing as the virus started to rage through our county, we started closing programs for anybody that we thought would, an event that would draw over 50, as the governor told us to do, and also our county executive. Then the next day we started to close all events that could be anybody reach a crowd of over 10. So that was basically all the programs in our library we closed, but we remained open. Then we were extremely upset by the amount of deaths we were seeing, particularly in our elder community and our Life Care Center. So we made the decision to stop all outreach services to seniors. We stopped bringing books to them, which broke my heart, quite honestly, because they rely upon us, so many of them. We did that to anybody homebound. We next closed all of our meeting rooms another day. And then finally, we got to social distancing. We tried that for 2 days, based again on the governor's advice. And again, we never wanted to close. We were trying to work our way through this, so we did not have to close. So we tried social distancing, and I have lots of comments about how that really is difficult to do in a library, which I'm happy to answer any questions about our experience. But the really tipping point is when, and I always said this, once the schools close in our county, and our county is very large, we're 2,500 square miles, we have 18 school districts. Schools were starting to close, but we had not all of our school districts closed, so we remained open. But when the governor ordered all schools closed on March 14th, that was the tipping point, and then we closed all of our libraries. Initially, we were going to close and staff were going to report to work, but given the governor and the county executive's plea for people to remain in their homes, I didn't think it prudent to make people come to work, and to, even with social distancing within a library, there's a lot of fear out there, and I thought just for the sake of our staff and the public, we were going to stay home. And that's what we're doing for the next 2 weeks, but that could change. Our staff are working at home. Those that can, of course, our IT, our HR, our finance people, we're continuing to pay people. They are working from home. We're encouraging all kinds of work from home, which I'll talk about later. But that's where we are now. And the current update this morning is 1,376 Washingtonians have been diagnosed with the COVID-19, and we've had 74 deaths, 60 of which have occurred in King County. So we're still really in the middle of this. I will say that I am currently on a countywide pandemic working group where I get to raise issues that are library-oriented. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of clear data on public library issues such as print books. I've seen 72 hours, I've seen 2 weeks, I've seen surfaces cleaning. We don't know enough to know right now. And I've also pushed out what we're doing to national groups because I think since we were on the leading edge, I thought it important to share what we were going through. And then finally, we're working with the county to see if there's any grant opportunities for us. The Seattle Foundation has come through. We're trying to see what we can do as far as augmenting our services. So, and I have a list of services that were currently being offered, but I was going to give you an opportunity, Dan, to ask me some questions if you had at this point.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure people are eager to get that list. So 2 questions that came in right away. Someone asked, how did you know that it was going to be so big? I was one of the first to start preparing at my library, even though there weren't yet cases in my state.
Well, because we were on the leading edge and because we had a really proactive county executive and governor, they were warning us, and we had daily press conferences. So that's how we knew that this was going to be this was going to turn into a really big event. And the other thing to remember is we were on the Pacific Coast. We were one of the first first areas to actually have a case, and then we wisely looked at what was happening in China and decided that this was something that we couldn't ignore.
Somebody asked, how far out is your library planning right now? Are you looking at just the next several months? Are you going beyond that?
Yeah, well, one of the things and one of the pieces of advice I can offer is that we were always trying to anticipate the next step. So, for instance, when we initially started doing more cleaning, we said, okay, what if it's not working, or what if this happens? What do we do next? So right now, what we're anticipating is a couple of scenarios. One is that we're closed for 6 weeks until the schools come back. Once the schools open, we will open. I can pretty much tell you that. But then, what if the schools close until June? What if, we can't get good information regarding books? Because you have to understand, it's not just the passing out of print collections, it's also getting them back. And we want to strongly discourage getting any materials back right now since we don't know enough. So yeah, we're anticipating another scenario, and I have to be honest, there's certainly going to be an economic hit. There is a huge economic hit happening right now in the Seattle area, and it's going to affect cities, city government, and state where property tax funded. It could affect when we get our money to keep running. The one thing we did do when I first got here, and I'm really proud that we did it, is we created an emergency, similar to what cities do. We had an emergency fund we put away a certain, in our reserve, we have an emergency reserves policy. So now we have a certain amount of, which I never thought we would use, frankly. I thought it would be for earthquakes because I live on the West Coast. Who knew? But we have emergency reserve funds so we can keep the library going in the case of us not being able to collect property tax in a certain amount of time. But we are certainly looking at some really worst case scenarios here, both from the service side, but also from our ability to fund our library system.
Yeah, well, that's not fun to hear, but it's very useful to hear. So we appreciate the insight. I think we're going to be moving on to our next panelist soon, but I think people do want to hear your list that you were mentioning.
Yeah. So first of all, I need to mention this, that part of the problem with closing schools and libraries has to do with an internet issue, the equity issues we're seeing, especially with children who do not have access to the internet, rely on our library computers to do their homework. This to me is heartbreaking. I don't have a good solution to it right now because that's just, I think the solution is our government, and this is political, need to start looking at internet access as like electricity and water, that this should be bandwidth, connectivity should be a national given. But that's my political statement because it isn't. This is the problem we're seeing now, that kids cannot connect with their schools in a way that more kids that are better off can. So what we're doing so far is, first of all, we've stopped the ordering of print books. Since we're not moving books around our system, there's really no reason to order them. We've moved a large amount of money, $350,000, into purchasing digital books. We'll probably increase that. We increased our hold to inventory ratio from 5-to-1 to 4-to-1. Those of you who are in the public library know what I'm talking about. We're doing Tell Me a Story online pre-recorded story times. We're increasing tutor.com capacity to serve more students online, presuming they have online access. We are currently answering reference questions by mail, and we will soon have chat and phones up by next. I thought this would be an easy lift, but apparently because of our sophisticated Cisco software, it's kind of difficult to, we have to get our folks connected regionally and out. So that's something we're working on. We promoted our e-card option. We actually saw a 389% increase in requests for e-cards on March 18th compared to 2020 compared to 2019. So that's been a huge asset for us that we already had the e-card in place. Our Wi-Fi remains on, so people are driving to our parking lots for access, and our librarians are preparing blobs and FAQs, and we're looking into online programming like book talks and book clubs. I don't think any of this I'm saying is anything different than what many of you are already thinking. And we're pursuing any kind of help from our county, from foundation help to buy more digital books. From the CERC, no fines. We are a fine library. We've waived all fines. We've ceased all collection agency activities. We've unblocked patrons who have gone into block status. All active holds are suspended. We don't want anybody driving up to our libraries right now. The governor has been really clear we want people to stay at home, so we're not creating an attractive nuisance by having them come see us at this point. But that's liable to change, so that's where we are right now.
All right. One question that has come up frequently, and then we will move on to our next presenter now. Lisa, I know you're not a physician or a biologist, but we are getting this question a lot here. I'm going to try to synthesize all the ways this was asked into one question. People are asking, how can and how should we quarantine books which are being returned right now? People don't know how to quarantine or clean items. Obviously, it's not practical to clean every individual page of a book. Do you have anything to share on that topic?
Great question. And one of the things, no, I don't have anything to share because I'm really adamant that if we don't know, we shouldn't be doing. And so what I am doing, however, is I've made a plea to our county health and to nationally that we need some good direction when it comes to library materials. That's the best I can do at this point because, we need to have, we have a lot of anecdotal. I've seen 3 days, I've seen 2 weeks. And of course, as I mentioned before, once the books go out and they come back, what do you do with that? So right now we're just choosing because, one of the other things I need to add, our staff are really, rightly so, they're overwhelmed. They're very upset and nervous. I'm nervous also. And part of my job is to make sure just try to calm things down at this point. So at this point, we're not going to deal with the books right now. The other thing that we're trying to do is help our staff internally connect with each other. And we're now offering, just like you're doing with our webinar, we're offering webinars internally to our staff on pay issues, because pay is an issue, on cleaning. What are we doing in our libraries right now? On self-care, we're going to do some webinars. So how can people feel better about what's going on and, managing their stress also. So we're also offering to our staff internal support. So that's what we're doing right now. And sorry, I don't have a better answer.
No, yeah, we will work. We at ALA will work to get some resources and content together for people because that's a great question, and it's another one that we're all dealing with. So, Lisa, thank you so much for your time. You actually gave us an excellent transition point because we are going to move on to Lauren, who's going to be talking with us about mental health. So, Lisa, thank you so much. We really appreciate your being here. And we're going to move on to Lauren Mcclain. Lauren's a certified instructor for the National Council for Behavioral Health and Mental Health First Aid USA. Lauren, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
We really appreciate you taking the time. So we've got about 1,100 people attending live and tons more that are going to be listening to the recording. I think it's safe to say that every single person here is feeling the effects of this crisis psychologically in some way. As I mentioned, I'm at home right now trying to balance my work and family life. I know that's the case for tons of people. A lot of people have never worked from home before and are now trying to figure out how to do that. So stress levels here are through the roof. I think that's fair to say. We've worked with you previously on webinars where you've helped train librarians on how to be mental health first responders. So as someone who's been engaged with community mental health your entire career, can I just start with a really general question? What's your perspective on the current situation and how it's affecting people?
That's a great question. Responding to COVID-19, taking an especially emotional toll on people, particularly if you witness suffering, risk of personal harm or well-being, intense increased workloads. People are moving from working in office to telecommuting. That causes disruption to day life as you know it. Pre-quarantine, pre-isolation. If you are, exposed or diagnosed, confirmed with COVID-19, you may be separated from your family. And you're maybe faced with life and death decisions, especially as we heard, death of grandparents, those have underlying health conditions. we see the chronic news reports of people panic buying and wiping out daily essentials, leaving those who are elderly and those who have underlying conditions without anything to aid in their daily lives that are necessities. Many of these instances, we experience, people will be experiencing what we call secondary traumatic stress reactions. For example, your coworker or neighbor has a confirmed case of COVID and you see how their quarantine situation is affecting them. The secondhand experience can be a state of traumatic stress for you. Please note that secondary traumatic stress is just as valid as firsthand experience, just as exposure to someone with COVID is just as scary as confirming you have the virus yourself. Remember that each individual reacts differently to a stressful situation. Your response to that particular situation may be completely different from another person's due to a number of factors. What you may find, panic or stress-inducing may be trivial to another person. That does not negate how you're feeling or what others are.
Lauren, I'm sorry to jump in and interrupt you. A couple people in the audience are saying, I know you've got a lot of information to cover. A couple people are asking if you can speak a little slower.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Sorry for advance.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Okay.
No. So going back to your experience is going to be valid no matter what happens. It's important to understand that what you will be triggered by, what causes you stress, panic, or anxiety may be entirely different from somebody else. Please remember that that situation is valid no matter who's experiencing it, be it firsthand or secondhand. While widespread stress and panic have certainly escalated exponentially in the past few weeks, I think it's a fair assessment to say that those who are enforcing and actively practicing social distancing are doing a solid job at trying to set past the herd immunity component of a pandemic. This necessary Public Health Safety Act protects vulnerable populations to try to stave off the nation's healthcare system from being pushed to the maximum. We see that in, cases such as China, Italy, where they're going on national lockdowns, unless you have to go out for the essentials. Social distancing is extremely disruptive to life as we know it. So it's natural and understandable that it will take a toll on your mental health. It's important to understand that your feelings are valid no matter what you feel at this time. But, we do have, some steadfast coping strategies to help you kind of mitigate the negative response that you may have to isolation.
All right. So just speaking in terms of all of us as individuals, not even getting into libraries yet, in terms of our day-to-day lives, what are some of the strategies we can employ right now to manage our own mental health?
Yeah, no, another great question. One of the ways to reduce stress during an outbreak is actually to share factual, empiric, steadfast, these are proven claims about the virus. Understand what actual risk is to yourself and to the people that you care about, be it your family, your employees, your friends, your students. It doesn't matter. You need to know what the legitimate risks are, and develop a plan accordingly to that. When you share accurate information about novel coronavirus, you can help others feel less stressed and allow you to connect with them on a personal level. Aside from learning about the outbreak, partaking in activities that will bring you joy, kind of recondoing it. I would say, does this bring me joy? Can I do this at home without, having to go out to get supplies, things like that? Talk to people you trust about your feelings, your anxieties, your stressors. One thing I'm working on doing myself is reframing my thinking into a positive manner. Instead of thinking of, I'm stuck inside, I have to be here where I don't want to be, I'm shifting to, I can finally focus on my home and myself. Set a limit on media consumption, including social media, local, national news. You don't want to be, attached to your device or that news source, 18 hours a day. Make it as minimal as possible. Try to stay close to your normal routine by maintaining some semblance of structure from pre-quarantine days. Try to avoid obsessing over endless coronavirus coverage. I know it's easier said than done. Try to keep your home organized, predictable, and tidy. When things are thrown off the normative, that's when chaos sneaks in. start a new quarantine ritual. That's one thing I have to do. You find yourself something that you enjoy, that works better for you in your life, rather than your pre-quarantine days. I've learned, I like something a certain way, or where my furniture now is compared to where it was previously. Granted, trying to find something to buy the time. So moving around furniture is a way to do that. Use your virtual options as a professional, or and talk to a professional if possible. Some insurances are waiving tele-doc copays during the pandemic, so check to see if your insurance is one of them. It may be beneficial to talk to a psychologist or a therapist if your anxiety is higher than normal, but also be mindful of the time you spend looking at a screen. I know being in isolation or self-quarantine and working at home, we're going to be, stuck at our computers or, watching TV. And for those of you that have been exposed or, have been confirmed with COVID, limit possible if you don't have to work. If you're telecommuting, still practice the 20-20-20 rule. For every 20 minutes, you work at your computer, look away from the screen, focus on an object 20 feet away for 20 seconds. This method has been proven in preventing eye fatigue, which comes with its own set of issues such as headaches, dry eyes, things like that. So if you're telecommuting and working from home, you still want to be as productive as possible, and being able to mitigate eye fatigue or eye stress would be one way to practice a good physical technique to also give a positive aspect to your mental health as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. And there are, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, WebEx is experiencing some load issues because there are so many people telecommuting right now. So your audio's been a little choppy. I don't think that's a problem on your end, but I just want to summarize some of the things you said because a couple of people missed them. And one question right off the bat, someone asked if you could repeat the 20-20-20 rule.
Oh, yeah, sure. So the 20-20-20 rule is for every 20 minutes you spend looking at a screen, be it a cellular device, a laptop, a computer, a TV screen, take 20 seconds and then look at an object in the room 20 feet away. So you just want to lock your focus on this one object for 20 seconds, and that's going to, it causes basically a reflex in your optical nerve, and then your pupil will dilate to kind of focus its attention on that, and that will actually get your brain to kind of reset and recharge itself rather than just staring at that blue light that comes through our electronic devices.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. And I know another thing you mentioned was sort of using the Marie Kondo technique, decluttering your house. Funny, what we've been doing is we take the dog for a walk as a family every morning, and I've noticed that the alley is just filled with everybody's clutter. I thought we were the only ones who had that idea, and it looks like everybody's decluttering their house. So certainly a great time to do that. So the next question I want to ask you, many physical libraries have closed, but given that, physical proximity is limited right now, even when physical libraries are open, can you share some strategies and tools that might be available for us to use in our communities as a virtual resource, things we can do to help people in our communities without being able to be there for them physically?
Well, yeah, no, that's, one solid source of support is your community, regardless if you can be physically in person, or maybe in a text message or something like that. Last month, and I know this might, appeal to more millennials, but Snapchat announced a Here For You project, which provides in-app support to Snapchatters. I know many libraries are starting Snapchat, to put little stories up, things like that, to try to engage, certain age demographics. But one thing about the Here For You app of Snapchat is it's more for sending people experience for mental health or emotional crises, links to relevant resources and exercises to help people cope with such concerns. In addition to this very COVID-specific element, Snapchat has partnered with Active Minds Because of You, the crisis text Life Prevention Lifeline, Seize the Awkward, Young Minds, the Samaritan Diana Award, in order to provide content designed for just mental health concerns that are not limited to anxiety, depression, stress, grief, suicidal thoughts, bullying. If you can, post to Facebook, Instagram, your library's webpage, send out email blasts. Let your communities know that there are free online resources offered by the library or outside institutions, because we're here to build a support system and offer information that can better provide for our communities. Some of the great resources, Audible, Libby, Overdrive, Hoopla, ABC Mouse is providing free online tools for kids at this time, for those that can't go to school. Varsity Tutors is looking to connect students with tutors on live and demand. Released a free product called Virtual School Day for students and parents as schools close across the globe due to the coronavirus pandemic. In addition, many universities are participating in Ask a Professional, live streams on Facebook and YouTube for kids and teenagers to ask, hypothetically, like a scientist a question. They'll get a free science lesson out of it. Tracking your mood using the Samson National Helpline is free. It's confidential, open 24/7, 365. They also have referral and information services for individuals facing mental anguish and substance use disorders. You can use the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, has a guide for parents and caregivers, families to cope with COVID. Always, one of my strongest advocates is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, because at some point, someone may go through what we consider a mental health crisis where, they are at their wits and they don't know any other options. And so they turn to that option of, completing suicide, and we want to get them the help and interview for that. So I'm always a big supporter of, using their online chat feature, calling the Prevention Lifeline. You can even call on behalf of somebody, call with them if you know that, they are, struggling with, a mental health issue or going through a problem that, they can't open up to somebody else. They have three-way calling, so it's always a great resources. For coping tools and online resources, you can actually visit the Lifeline website, suicidepreventionlifeline.org, or Vibrant Emotional Health Safe Space. It's vibrant.org /safe space. They have really great resources for online free resources for those experiencing the stress that COVID has provided into our communities. They also have links to educational resources that are companies are opening up for free that you usually have to pay for, to make sure kids are getting the education during this downtime.
All right, Lauren. We did get one person who asked if you can repeat what you said about creating a ritual.
Yeah, no. So create a ritual, we having the unique place where I get to work from home on a daily basis. I have a ritual that I would do, pre-quarantine days, where I'd get up and I take the dog out on a long walk, and then I come home and I have my coffee, and then I get to work. Well, now that I'm on basically a hardship leave because I have been in quarantine because of COVID, I have to create this whole new ritual of, okay, well, I can still take the dog out, so I can keep that same semblance of what I did previously, but now it's a matter of how do I fill my time with something that's productive, good for, my home life, but also my mental health. So right now it's take the dog out, have my coffee, and then I figure out, is the pantry closet not organized well enough? What am I constantly looking for in my daily life that I don't see out in the front? So I went through, Marie Kondo the pantry, went to the closet, organized, okay, summer months are coming here in Virginia, so let's start putting all the winter stuff away, but leave out a couple things, ahead of time in case we have one of those weird fall springs where it drops down to 30 degrees again. So you just kind of want to find, things that work for you in the current situation. So don't put pressure on yourself to be productive every day. So it's not having to do 8 hours productivity if, you're stuck in that isolation. It's a matter of finding small things to accomplish and mark it off the checklist. So set yourself small goals rather than a large goal that, may take weeks to produce the result from.
All right, Lauren. Well, we really appreciate your insights, and we're going to follow up with you and see if we can get some lists of some of those resources after the event. But just a reminder to everyone out there, we are recording this event, so you'll be able to see the chat and listen to the recording after everything is complete in case there's anything that you missed. And I see so many of you are sharing great resources in the chat space. So again, Lauren, we want to thank you for your time and your expertise. It's a huge help to all of us. And now we're going to turn to Richard. So Richard, after all of this, you get the responsibility of calming us all down. Telling us about mindfulness.
That might be a little bit much to put on me, Dan.
Well, so first of all, Richard, thank you so much for joining us. You, of course, you're a librarian by trade, but you've also written and taught for us extensively about mindfulness and organizational dysfunction. Right now, I think we're sort of all in a place of organizational dysfunction, whether that organization is our library, our community, our family, whatever. We're all, things are not functioning the way they're meant to right now, that's for sure. So for those of us who are unfamiliar, do you mind just giving us a very brief overview of the concept of mindfulness and how it's applied as a stress reduction tool?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me on, and I appreciate hearing from Maria and Lisa, and really a lot of that stuff from Lauren too, that I think is going to overlap a little bit. I think most people have a general idea of what mindfulness is, but I figured I'd just give a real quick summary. One of the definitions that I like is from the book Fully Present, which you might add to your reading list if you're working on one of those like I am right now, with time. But the definition in that book is mindfulness is the art of observing your physical, emotional, and mental experiences with deliberate, open, and curious attention. I like to, when we talk about mindfulness, open with that, and I think it covers a lot of the things with mindfulness in a nutshell, but really it boils down to just being present in the moment and not being sort of fixated in the past and what we could have done differently, and then anxious about the future. So you talk about what we're going through right now, thinking about second guessing potentially, or more so, I think, anxious about the future. And this is the opportunity that mindfulness gives us to try to be a little bit more present and kind of ratchet that down. Without getting too much into the origins, it developed from spiritual practices that have existed, of course, for thousands of years. But it really came into the United States in particular after 1979 because of the work of John Kabat-Zinn, who actually applied it to people that were dealing with chronic pain conditions. And he found that people that engaged in mindful practice were able to control their chronic pain in a way that even medication wasn't able to do for them. And so it started there, but it's become pervasive and being applied in education and libraries and other situations as well. As you noted, we've written a lot of this, my colleagues and I. The Mindful Librarian was the first book that we wrote about it, but then we collected a bunch of stories from libraries in mindfulness in your library. And that was really interesting. There's a lot of librarians doing a lot of different things with mindfulness, either with their staff or with patrons. And then we addressed it a little bit in our recent book on cultivating civility. But really the most common practices that people associate with mindfulness are breathing meditations, probably the most common, loving kindness meditation, walking meditation, mindful eating, yoga in its various forms. There's a bunch of different things you can do with yoga that go from anything from very mild to more difficult. And then Tai Chi is another thing that people do related to mindfulness. And a lot of these things, before the crisis, you could take classes in this type of stuff. But there's a lot of resources online, a lot of books, a lot of videos. I moved to Horry County not too long ago, a couple of years ago from Charlotte, and I was involved in some organizations there, and I saw already some emails where they're talking about moving some of their tutorials and things about, getting people involved in mindfulness online. So I think that's a good thing. I think it's something we're going to see a lot more of.
All right. Well, thank you for that wonderful capsule definition. So going beyond what we all typically consider stress, how do you see mindfulness working as a crisis management tool? Obviously, we're in a time where massive amounts of people are under a huge amount of stress. Do you see sort of a broad application, ways we can apply mindfulness as a community? I hate to, be sort of new agey, but even globally right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought of it more on the personal level. I think when we're trying to consider, how do we apply it now? Joe Eshelman, Joe Henry, and Martin House and I have done a lot of workshops and writing on this topic. And we did deal with extreme issues, burnout, the bullying, harassment, mobbing, a lot of things, again, that aren't easy to address. And I've been trying to think about just how does this relate to what's happening right now. I guess there's obviously differences, but there's also some similarities in terms of the kind of stressors and pressure that especially these extreme circumstances of dysfunction or difficulty kind of put on an individual. One of the things that we always emphasize, and I think Maria talked a little bit about this, the social connection. We've always emphasized the social connection when dealing with stress. So this, again, when we talked about it, dealing with difficult issues in the workplace, whether it's bullying or burnout, to stay connected to colleagues. So we have to adhere to this social distancing right now, but we need to be able to connect with technology and share our feelings and hopes and concerns with others. So I think it's really important that we stay connected. One of the things that I've been doing is calling my parents at least every other day at this point, for instance. But obviously I'm connecting with the people at work. We have 3 campuses, so we're spread out, and I've been trying to communicate with people, about work issues. But I think we need to be connected, just in generally. I'd say that if you're working from home, to make sure, as I think Lauren just said, to take breaks, maybe more than you usually would. We're under a lot of stress right now. We certainly can be productive, and I think it's helpful to be productive, but we also need to maybe give ourselves a little bit of slack right now. And lastly, what I'd say is that really flexibility is really important right now, and patience with yourself in handling this. Another book that's really good, Kristin Neff is the author of the book on self-compassion, and it really highlights that part of mindfulness. And I think that's really key for us right now. I think you see people expressing, at least I have on Facebook, some pretty dire thoughts. I have relatives that work in the hospitality and hotel industry and restaurant, for instance, who are very, very concerned about their livelihood. So it's going to be difficult, but if we focus on that too much, that's not going to help. So, I think just kind of remembering that we will get through this. There will be an end point, even if it takes us a while to get there.
Yeah, and I started at the community level. Maybe I should have started at the personal level. So for those of us who are stuck at home, do you have any suggestions or resources we can use? You've listed a couple, and we're getting tons of suggestions in the chat space, by the way, so thank you to our audience for that. But any suggestions for resources or techniques, exercises we can do to help us in our day-to-day lives?
Well, I'm struggling a little bit there. I've been talking with my wife's a librarian also. We've been talking about how we're going to move forward in terms of being at home because her school is shut down. And one of the things that we've talked about is creating some structure and boundaries. And, as Lauren noted too, about sort of moving things around and shifting things around. I'm actually sitting at a desk that I ran out and bought just the other day at Walmart to throw together because I didn't really have an office space. So I just kind of threw together a little office space. But again, kind of thinking differently about that. But, the boundaries thing I think is important because, I could see myself easily just kind of being consumed with being connected and, never separating from work. I teach for UNCG's Library Information Studies program. And one of the things that I try to do is stay connected with those students who are very stressed out right now too. And I have to sort of be conscious about giving myself a break from that. So I think that, taking that into this, just not being obsessed about, again, as we said before, being productive all the time. Setting up an exercise routine or a meditation routine, I think would be good too. Even if it's just 10 minutes of meditation a day, just kind of sit there and do that and kind of commit to it, whether it's, maybe in the morning if you're at home, or, a couple times a day, and then getting routines with email, things like that. I think it's a good time to work on professional development. One of the things that occurred to me with this is I really think that distance learning is going to push ahead maybe 5 years rather than, a year between 2020 and 2021 because of all the forced learning that's going to occur on that. So anything you can do to upgrade your skills and work on that, I think is going to be good. Again, I think it's important to read, relax, look at the museums are doing online tours, which is kind of neat. I think even though we have structure too, you had mentioned something about your son and video games. I think we have 4 kids, and they're in their teens and 20s, and one of the teenagers is kind of having a special sort of challenge with it. So we're trying to create some structure, but then I set up a dartboard the other day. We pulled out board games. We have a fire pit in the backyard. We're just going to try to kind of mix things up. And then the last thing I'd say in terms of, being stuck at home potentially and trying to find things to do, there's a lot of mindful meditation videos, as I mentioned earlier. John Kabat-Zinn is actually doing an event on Eventbrite online next Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern, I think. He's on the West Coast, but there's going to be a lot more of that, I think, that you're going to see online. I think that's kind of what I would suggest. There's a ton of things that, I see the suggestions coming in. There's a lot of suggestions in various articles I've come across. And I think in some sense, kind of, you're going to have to figure out what makes sense for you and then work that into your day.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't claim any expertise on mindfulness, but I could just add, as if you're looking for something to do as a family, you mentioned a meditation routine. That's definitely something you can all do together. That works really well right now. That's helping us all hang on. So many of us in the audience are joining from home. I think a few people are still in their physical libraries. So for those people who are still going to work in a physical library, how can we use mindfulness as a tool, both to our own advantage and for our patrons, for people who are, stressed in the physical space?
Well, I've been thinking about this quite a bit too, because, as we shifted to being sort of limited to no physical library, but, one of the things, if you are still in a library, I think mindfulness, again, emphasizes being present. And I think you really need to be especially present when you are working with people at this point, not touching your face, maybe using gloves as a mental cue. May seem awkward, but it's necessary. I was in an emergency meeting with the deans the other day, I was thinking Monday morning, and I was sitting in the room. We're talking about the crisis, and we're talking about things that we can do, and I noticed everybody was touching their face. So, it's not going to be easy. So you're going to have to stay very, very much in the present to kind of be aware and safe. I think we need to insist on safety from our leaders. I think it's the right call right now. It's just my opinion, but I think others have expressed this as well, that this is different than a hurricane. This is different than other circumstances. I think we need to err on the side of safety by pulling people out of the workplace as much as we possibly can. There really just, as other people know too, I mean, there just hasn't been enough testing in my mind to think that we really have a grasp of what's even going on out there. I think erring on the side of caution is I think really important. And then lastly, I'd say just be ready to transition. If you are in the library right now, collect documents that you need. One of the last things I did was throw a bunch of stuff on a flash drive. I was caught, I'll admit, I was caught a little bit flat-footed. I didn't really consider, we had floods here, of course. We've sort of felt like we dealt with this to some extent. Just a couple of years ago, I first started, and I'd been in my job like a week or two, and they were like, go home for 4 weeks. There's floods, and there were things that we could do in those circumstances. This is just a lot different. So, for instance, one of the things that we decided to do, we knew we had chat reference and things like that, but we're going to try to do a system where we've assigned each librarian a group of students based on their last name and their campus to be the personal librarian contacts for, again, specific groups of students, so that students know where to go for one-on-one assistance during daytime hours. That's going to start week after next. It's all experimental at this point. I've told staff we're going to just try, and we're going to try and be flexible. We'll see what works. And of course, just be as forgiving as we possibly can. We're not going to charge fines. I'm actually at the point of crafting, before we went on today, a message saying that I don't think we're going to try to even get stuff back until fall at this point. Just why even create that headache for people and anxiety for people? But again, different circumstances for different people in different libraries.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So I want to address a question that's come up a bunch of times in the chat space. So we are recording today's event, and the recording is going to include the chat space. I know there are tons of resources that people have posted in the chat space, and thank you all for doing that. It's really just a great example of how we're all coming together on this. So those will be in the chat space. You will be able to view those in the recording. It should be available within 24 hours, and you'll get an email directing you to the recording. So one question we had, Richard, let's see, I've got a few specifically. Can you remind us what was the title of the first book you mentioned about being present?
Sure, The Mindful Librarian.
I think so. My head's spinning a bit right now too, but Fully Present was the book. That's right.
Oh, Fully Present. I'm sorry.
Our audience comes to the rescue, of course.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, this is a good book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really great stuff, actually.
Another question that came up, can you recommend any mindful activity ideas for those who are stuck in small apartments, people in New York, other big cities?
I think just the same stuff we've talked about, other than maybe getting out and going for walks. I mean, certainly, one of the things that we've seen is you can go outside as long as you distance yourself from people. I'm sitting by the window right now in my neighborhood, and I can tell you that we barely ever see anybody biking or walking by, and I've seen just a ton of people walking by. We actually just moved into a new house, and we were in a really tiny apartment when we had first moved here, and I know how that can get claustrophobic. So I think, getting out and going for a walk here and there whenever you possibly can. You can get in the car and drive around and not go anywhere even too, right? Theoretically, I guess, just to get out of the space and do some stuff like that.
That's true. A couple people asked about the John Kabat-Zinn virtual event that's coming up. Did you say that was taking place on Wednesday? I'm going to see right now if I can dig up a link.
Yeah, I got I think because of things that I'm involved in, it sent me I was trying to find that ahead of time, and I couldn't quite. Let me see. I'll look through here.
Here we go. Let's see. Free live stream with John Kabat-Zinn. Here, I found a link here. Looks like you've got to register. Yeah, there may be. Oh, there it is. Someone beat me to it. Yeah, there's information about that. They're saying tickets, so maybe there's a limited audience size, but I imagine it'll be recorded. And finally, Richard, one more question. We just wanted someone asked if you could just briefly, in a couple sentences again, repeat your definition of mindfulness.
Sure. The one that comes from the book Fully Present is mindfulness is the art of observing your physical, emotional, and mental experiences with deliberate, open, and curious attention. I think one of the key words there is deliberate. So you really want to, again, it's about being present.
All right. Well, that's a wonderful and beautiful place to close. And, Amy, thank you. Amy Waldman just posted a list of as many resources as she could find. That is so helpful. We will, maybe we'll take your list, Amy, if that's all right, and put it in the follow-up email. But yeah, in closing, I just want to thank everybody, our panelists, our audience, Maria, Stella, Lisa, Lauren, Richard. We really appreciate you taking the time to help provide insight, share experience and guidance during a time when we're all in this crisis together. And to our audience, I've never seen an audience this interactive and this insightful. You were all so helpful. I feel like we've achieved our goal of creating a community of resources and help here. We are planning another event on virtual resources, distance learning, working from home. That should be taking place next week. Just look to the same channels of communication you found that you used to find out about this event. We should be communicating about that very soon. And thank you all for bearing with us with the huge audience today. I know we didn't get to every question that everybody had, and we weren't able to troubleshoot everybody's audio issue. We appreciate you bearing with us. Yeah, we'll be sending that follow-up email within 24 hours. I just want to wish everyone a wonderful day and wonderful weekend. And please stay safe, take care of yourself, and try to manage your own stress. We're all doing our best here, and we'll get through this together. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.